All right, let's dive right into this explainer. Today, we're unpacking an ancient text that, honestly, has the power to completely rebuild how we view our personal identity. We're looking at Jeremiah chapter 9, verse 24. This is a profound piece of scripture because it fundamentally pivots human identity away from the usual worldly achievements and redirects it toward an intimate relationship with God. It explores what true fulfillment actually looks like. So if you've ever felt that exhausting pressure to constantly prove your worth, you're going to find a lot of freedom in what we cover today. Think about this for a second. When life gets incredibly tough, what do you actually boast about? Seriously, when you're lying in bed at the end of a really exhausting day, what's your anchor? Is it your career status, maybe your family's achievements, your physical fitness, or even your financial portfolio? We all have something we use to validate our existence. Which brings us to section 1, the exhausting treadmill. We really need to start by looking at the core of the problem. To truly grasp the weight of Jeremiah 9:24, we have to look at the context here. Jeremiah was speaking to people who were heavily relying on their external status. They were basically running on a treadmill destined to break. God systematically strips away these typical human foundations, clearing away the rubble to offer a single, unshakable foundation. He calls out human wisdom and intellect, he calls out physical power and military strength, and he calls out material wealth. Now, by referring to these as rubble, the text isn't saying these things are inherently evil. Actually, the point is that they just make terrible foundations for your identity, mostly because they can literally all be lost in a single day. Moving on to section 2, rethinking how we know. Let's look at the biblical solution. This verse tells us that instead of boasting in wealth or power, we should boast that we understand and know God. But here's the catch. The ancient Hebrew concept of knowing is wildly different from our modern interpretation. In Western culture, knowing usually means intellectual assent, right? It means you know about a subject well enough to pass a written exam. But the Hebrew minds writing the Old Testament operated on a completely different frequency. They were talking about a relational covenant. It's not just knowing about, it's knowing with. So the crucial point of this first Hebrew concept is that it's not just knowing that God exists, but gaining true insight into his ways, his heart, and his timing. The Hebrew word here is haskel. It basically implies practical wisdom. It means looking at life through God's perspective and understanding how he operates in the real world. Think of it like the difference between just knowing the rules of a game and actually having the situational awareness to play it masterfully. And then it goes even deeper with one of the most profound words in the entire Old Testament. The word is yada. This denotes a vibrant, daily communion rather than just passing some theological test. It's not casual knowledge at all. In fact, it's used to describe the most intimate human relationships, like when the text says Adam knew Eve, his wife. When God says to boast in knowing him, he is looking for people who are in a vibrant, experiential relationship with him. He wants you to know his voice and absolutely trust his character, even in the dark. That takes us to section 3, 3 pillars of character. Let's explore these specific attributes of God. You see, God doesn't just leave this intimate knowledge as some abstract idea floating in the clouds. He gives us his own personal resume right in this verse. He outlines 3 distinct traits that form the absolute core of his character. The first one is hesed. Instead of a fleeting, temporary emotion, think of this as God's stubborn love that absolutely refuses to give up on his people. It's a fierce, loyal covenant commitment. When God says he practices hesed on the earth, he means he is fundamentally oriented toward showing mercy. It's grace in action, a love that holds on tight, even when we mess up. Then we have justice. But justice here isn't just a cold legal verdict in a courtroom. It is an absolute refusal to tolerate oppression and a clear mandate to treat everyone with creator-given dignity. The word is mishpat. In the ancient Near East, justice was an action verb. It literally meant actively stepping in to defend the vulnerable, the widow, the orphan, the poor, the stranger. God is a God of mishpat because he cannot and will not tolerate cruelty or dishonesty. He is actively involved in restoring order to a broken world. And the third pillar is tzedakah. While justice is the action, tzedakah is the perfect, uncompromised standard that ensures God always acts in accordance with his loving nature. It refers to perfect moral purity and right relationships. It essentially means being completely straight, true, and without fault. It reassures us that God acts rightly and and that absolutely everything he does is perfectly good and fair. He is the ultimate unmoving standard. Now, here is a truly staggering revelation. What brings the Creator pure, unadulterated joy isn't massive church buildings or human achievements. It's seeing these three traits practiced and mirrored on the earth. The verse concludes with God saying, "For in these things I delight." The Hebrew word for delight here is hafez, which means to take immense, deep pleasure in something. Just pause and think about that. The Creator of the universe is telling us exactly what makes him truly happy. He delights when his character, his steadfast love, his justice, and his righteousness is actively practiced by us here on earth. All right, let's bring it all together in Section 4, the ultimate core shift. This is the deep life application. Because let's face it, information without application is just trivia, right? If we're truly going to trade the rubble of human boasting for an unshakable identity in God, it requires us to radically rethink our daily habits, our faith, and our most deeply held values. There are 3 practical steps to guide you off that exhausting treadmill and onto a firm, unshakable foundation. We're going to break each of these down, but essentially it involves changing how we communicate with God, changing what we prioritize in our prayers, and finally, fundamentally changing where we draw our daily self-worth from. For step 1, you have to cultivate a space for quiet prayer and meditation to actually connect with His presence. You've got to move past simply reading history or debating theology. You can literally spend a lifetime reading books, learning history, and having incredibly fascinating debates about theology without ever actually knowing Him in that intimate yada sense we talked about. The checkup for your own life is super simple. Do you talk to God as a father and friend, or do you just talk about Him as an abstract concept? Step 2 is where you flip your prayers. It's about actively seeking to show loyal love to those who can't repay you and standing up for the vulnerable in your own community. We spend a vast amount of our prayer energy asking God to bless our delights, right? Our comfort, our financial success, our career. But Jeremiah 9:24 invites us to align our agenda with His delight. So ask yourself where you can show that stubborn love to someone who has hurt you. Look for ways to take active steps towards social justice and compassion right exactly where you live. And step 3 brings us to this beautiful truth. If your ultimate boast is that the Creator of the universe deeply knows and loves you, you are completely freed from the need for self-validation. When you finally stop relying on your achievements, your status, or your intellect to prove your worth, you experience this profound humility and just unbelievable relief. If your anchor is the eternal God, your identity is bulletproof. It survives a bad economy, a failing body, and the absolute hardest seasons of life. So, as we wrap up this explainer, it really is time to leave the rubble of worldly achievements behind. Are you ready to find your true identity in knowing Him? That treadmill of validating yourself through wisdom, power, or wealth, it's going to wear you out eventually. But an intimate daily walk with the God of steadfast love, justice, and righteousness, that will sustain you forever. As you step away from the screen today and get back into the reality of your busy life, let this one question echo in your mind. When everything else is stripped away, what will be your ultimate boast?